Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Jersey First TV and the Nader narrative. If you've been watching in New Jersey over the past about 4 years since late 2019, there's been a growing grassroots movement, mainly of moms, not all moms, some dads too, but really a lot of moms who got activated, didn't plan to, but suddenly found themselves in a fight for their children, in a fight for religious freedoms, frankly, in a fight for medical freedom, and then in a fight for all the things going on at the schools. So this has been a change in our state that we have not really seen in the past. And it's a good thing, even though the fight is big and the fight can be tiring. We now have new smart people involved who are encouraging you, the listener, to get involved as well. And I want to bring somebody on who's a friend, who I admire, who's been right there in the fight with all of us and has a thing or two to let you know maybe some things you should consider yourself. Luz Vasquez, welcome to Jersey First TV. So happy to have you on today.
So happy to be on, Elizabeth. I've seen you as well. Just fight the good fight of faith in the state and fighting for things that do matter to us regular people who feel there's so much violation happening to the family.
Yeah.
And especially to the people of faith here in the state.
Absolutely. And you, like myself, were a professional, a business person, mother of four. Both of us are mothers of four, living your life really. And, living the American dream, doing what you have to do, having your good days, having your bad days, all the things that life brings. And suddenly the government just starts to go after the things that we take for granted, which is really the rights to make decisions for our children. In 2019 and 20, it was medical freedom, which was religious freedom, really. So suddenly you get activated, and we don't have to go back to everything that was happening back then, but you got activated. Did you ever plan to be an advocate? Did you ever plan for this to take up so much of your time and become really one of the main things that you do?
I was active in my 20s. To believe it or not, I was in a part of another party in my 20s. And then I got saved. I just rededicated my life to the Lord at that time. And with that comes a change of value system. So I just decided to walk away from it. And I was still in my 20s, very active at that time on the opposite side. And at that point, I just decided to focus on raising my kids, ministry, the church, and all of another 20 plus years after that, that I was pushed into getting involved again in 2019. That started really with the curriculum battle, with the curriculum that Governor Murphy imposed on everyone. And at that point, I was beside myself when I just realized what had just been made law under the radar, because I wasn't really paying attention to anything at that point.
Right.
You're just living life.
That's right.
Focusing on your family, advancing your career, going to soccer games and lacrosse games. And all of a sudden I get hit with that. And I was horrified. And I was really desperate at that time, and my old habits kicked in as to what I need to do, because I did it in my 20s. I knew what to do.
Sure.
And at that point, I really thought I was solo and I didn't have any help. And I jumped into the fight. I was going to Trenton. I was talking to, Sean Highland with, hey, could we do the opt-out option? I was desperate to find anything that we could do to opt our kids out of something that I felt violated the way I wanted to raise, my children at that time.
Right. And that's the key, right? That it was this sudden change of how you were not in the driver's seat. And that's something that we took for granted. We assumed came with being an American, that at least to a large degree, you could make decisions for your children. And when it comes to our public schools that previously New Jersey had been so proud of, suddenly they're changing everything. So when you look at that from a faith standpoint, especially, it becomes even harder, doesn't it? Because if you're not sending your kids to a private school, a religious school, you are sort of dealing with some things as it relates to different faiths, or maybe not faith supporting curriculum. But this was over the line, is over the line, what they're doing in our schools.
Has been over the line.
Yeah.
So I started to reach out to people. I sat with that time, I believe it was Senator Andrew Zach. And initially He seemed a little supportive. And then basically chief of staff told me, and this was the wonderful part about it, right before election, and they lost the election. Right before, they kind of basically told me, go fly kite, basically. You take a risk. Her exact words were, you take a risk when you put your kids in public education. My taxes pay for that.
That's right.
But you just can't tell me that I have to just accept anything, because we pay for this.
Right.
So in other words, I have no choice. This is just the way it is. Take it or lump it. And I was just not going to accept that. And I just started on a mission really to create an awareness among the faith community as to what was happening. And that initially probably I felt was my biggest struggle, just to realize that I just did not get the cooperation that I thought that we needed at that time. Organizations like Family Policy Alliance were right there with me.
Yeah.
But it was the faith community that at that time it fell on deaf ears. There was just really no real cooperation. I think a lot of that was they didn't understand the seriousness of what was happening. There were things that were under the radar. And when people don't understand how that translates into daily policy within the school system, then they just dismiss it as, this is just a phase. This will go away. Where if we ignore it, we can pray it away.
Right.
I heard that too. We're going to pray it away.
Well, certainly prayer is important, but
that's important. Absolutely.
We are supposed to act. So let's talk about this a little bit. Historically, the faith community and we can be talking about evangelicals or Catholics in this, or the Jewish faith, but historically, the faith community has been hesitant to get involved in anything that appears to be politics or advocacy work. There is this idea that as nonprofits, the Johnson Amendment says, hey, you can't do any of that. But Luz, that's not really true, is it? I mean, isn't that a false sense of threat that they cannot speak up, that their voice cannot be heard? Aren't we actually built in a foundation in a country that was built on the church and built on Christian Judeo values? And that actually, I'll tell you this, I know King George from my studies was most afraid of the Black Robe Regiment, which were the preachers that were in the pulpit that were supporting the revolution. So how did we get so far away from our roots?
I think we bought into the non-biblical belief of that whole separation of church and state.
Right.
And we've created an entire doctrine around it that we're not allowed to say that. No, if we're tax exempt, it says that you cannot promote a particular candidate or a party. It doesn't mean that you don't have to give the opportunity for them to voice their positions or their platforms to your congregation. It definitely doesn't mean that as a pastor or a faith leader that you do not have the right to take a position on a particular topic. Right. It was never intended for that, nor does it right now. Right. So I think that it's uncomfortable for them if they've never done it. Those that have been on the forefront, that have been bold about it, and now more are coming on board, they're realizing that, no, you're not taking a particular, our value system is not political. Right. They're our value system.
Correct.
So they, if we buy into this false narrative that if you take a position on a certain topic or you want to raise your family a certain way, then it becomes political. I think it's a cop out to avoid dealing with the seriousness of these issues on what should be presented to our children. How do we respect the parents' right to make these medical decisions for them in the schools? When it came to that battle with fighting for religious exemptions, which I was a part of that too, right. Because I'm going to decide what happens to my child's health, not the school. Right. And they tried to challenge that as well. I just think that it is a collaborative effort from this current administration to continually diminish parental authority over their children. Right. And now we just, the Senate just passed and lowered the consent age to be able to decide for behavioral health services. I, as a parent, need to know if my child is having issues with depression or anxiety. I also should be notified if my child wants to take on another identity in the school.
Right.
Now, these are serious issues that alter a family's life, good or bad. They cause major issues, and I do not think that omitting parents from these major decisions is the right thing to do. So this is not political. This is about families. This is
Right.
our right as people of faith to be able to decide these things for our family, regardless of where you stand on the faith issues. I don't think any parent wants to not have authority over their child.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Regardless where you stand
it,
on the,
it horrifies me
yeah, it is.
that
Yeah.
we're fighting for something that's God given. We're
Right.
fighting for rights, and really should be, we're fighting for the authority that they never gave us in the first place. It is a
Yeah.
God given authority to raise our families. So why am I even arguing with strangers for something that I already have?
Well, we're at that point now where
Mhm.
almost nothing surprises me, and we are fighting for very basic rights that weren't theirs to give or take in the first place.
Mhm.
If you look at the foundation of our country, it's really built on the structure of the family, and we know very well how important that is. So this really sort of evil intent to separate parents from children has such a boomerang, such long-lasting negative effects on the fabric of our society, and really, that's where the assault is. Now, when it comes to the faith community, Luz, when we look back on COVID, which was really the beginning of the onslaught of so many basic rights that we
Mhm.
never thought we'd have to fight for, some of the faith community were vocal, many were not. Were you disappointed in the general response of the church through COVID?
I was, yet I understood it.
Mm,
I understood it. And when it comes to the issue of COVID, people did lose their lives.
yeah,
Families did lose loved ones. It was a real thing. It's not that we're saying it was made up. It was a real
right.
sickness. I myself got sick with it twice.
Yeah,
I chose not to do what others have done and to deal with it.
you're right.
That I didn't buy into that narrative that
Right.
you need to do certain things in order to prevent it. I chose the natural route, and that was my choice. But I do understand the seriousness and the fear that pastors and leaders had, that if we don't implement these things, the narrative was you're responsible for people dying.
Right.
And I don't think that anybody wants that responsibility. So I think everyone, including my church, they erred on the side of caution. Now, my church did take a position where they opened up way earlier
Mm,
than what was recommended. And at that
mm.
point, they made a decision. We're not closing our doors ever again,
And
because
that's what I love.
we're not closing our doors ever again. We did it. We
Yes.
understood there was a fear.
Yes.
We understood all that. But if you can keep liquor stores opened and every other activity open, yet churches were not allowed to be open, then there's something wrong. There's something sinister there, because if we're talking about fear of catching something and people passing away, then they can also catch it at the liquor store.
Yeah, amen to that.
So,
Or the strip club, or all the other things
right.
that were
Or,
kept open. So there's definitely a lesson learned there from the faith community,
right.
which is good, and we embrace that.
And I
Very
respect, and I definitely want to
Yes.
say, I respect the seriousness. I respect the people who lost their loved ones.
right.
I lost a loved one.
Yeah.
I understand what it was like to be ill with it. It was
Mhm.
very serious. Fortunately, I didn't have to go to the hospital. So
Right.
it is a real thing.
Mhm.
And my heart breaks for those loved ones that were lost.
Right.
But I do think that we could have handled things a little better, other than executive orders that shut, people of the community of faith, just shut it down. And some churches never came back.
Some churches never
Never came back.
rebounded. And some
Mhm.
people, and the reality is it's not just the institution that may not have rebounded. Some people lost their faith. Some people stopped going to church and never came back. I have seen that now as well. Some people's habits changed. So it definitely had an impact. Now where we are, and a lot of lessons learned, it seems every major election year you hear about, if only the church would vote, if only, especially evangelicals and Catholics too, if they would turn out in great numbers. How do we activate them, and how do we get them to understand what you've said multiple times? It's not about politics. It's about really your God-given right and duty to vote on biblical values, which takes the party nature out of it. What do we do with that message?
I'm going to answer that with one word: relationship. If it's so important when you have a relationship, which it's one of the things I'm very proud of here in my county, in my community. I continue this relationship, even surrounding counties. I have a relationship with these pastors. I cultivate that relationship. I attend their events. I take opportunities to visit their churches, and I don't speak. I attend their services, but they know who I am.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there. I'm sitting there for the entire service. And then I take that moment to have a talk with the pastor. Hey, how are things going? Glad to see your things are going, and the church is beautiful. Worship team, was great. Just encouraging them and supporting them. That goes further than just a couple of times a year reaching out to them and asking them to, I need you to take a leap of faith here, and I need you to fight against this certain bill, because I have this ongoing relationship with them. When it came time for 5756 in Vineland, it really was a matter of picking up the phone. I need all hands on deck. I need everybody to show up. And what a sign that was when 2/3 of the room were people of faith. It was wonderful. Wow. It was wonderful.
And you're talking about, just so the audience knows, down in Vineland, where Luz is from, a longtime resident down there, very, very active, very well known in a lot of circles down there. When the 5756 came to the Board of Education to repeal that or to not adopt it, which was what came down from the state board about not alerting parents if their child wanted to transition in any way. I mean, it's more than that, but it's that. So you had the ability, because of relationships you have built, to be able to activate the members of the faith community, and they felt, the leaders in the faith community, they felt comfortable in that environment coming and speaking their mind, and it made a big difference.
Yeah. Now there a lot of them that spoke. Now you can speak with fear. It's nerve-wracking. Not everybody. It's different when you're preaching a sermon and people genuinely want to hear from you. It's another thing when you're speaking in opposition to something that is trending. You don't know who's going to be there. You don't know what reaction you're going to get. But I do appreciate those that were there to support those that were speaking, because people get nervous.
Yeah, they do.
And it's not an arena that they're used to being in. So I really commended him, and I thanked every single one of them that spoke, because it made a difference. Now, and I will tell you this, because I'm also a part of the local conservative, Republican Party, they also helped.
Yeah.
So it was a combined effort, but I could tell you the faith community came out strong and really made a difference. But I also said, because we're so involved, we supported the Board of Education candidates that we felt best supported our values. And that's how you were able to get a 7-2. So we didn't ignore these elections. We know who was for and for what. And it came through in who was elected. And that's how we were able to really repeal something that was not good for our district.
Not good for anyone. And, I remember when I was much younger that churches would do voter guides. I haven't seen them for a long time. They're allowed to do them as a 501c3. It's an educational tool that says these are the candidates at whatever levels, and this is their platform. I just haven't seen that for a long time. So I really want your message to get to everyone, to say, those that keep saying, listen, the faith community needs to get involved. Yes, they do. I want you to give everyone, as we close here, some top tips of what they can do to get their faith community involved, and why it's a marathon, not a sprint.
This is the long-term game. So this is exactly what you said. It's a marathon. And I'm going to say, now more than ever, the church can no longer stand on the sidelines and under, the guise of churches in their prayer meeting, only concerned about what's happening inside their churches.
Right.
When what's happening outside is now impacting you on the inside. Now it's in our living rooms, right? Now these things are being passed. These are laws that are being passed, and we cannot afford to stand on the sidelines. So this is what I recommend. Anyone that is running for office should have a conversation with your local faith leaders. Your faith leaders should know who your elected officials are. There should be a relationship between them and the mayors. them and city council members. The Board of Education members should know who these religious or faith leaders in the faith community are. If that is not happening, there is where you want to start. Because again, it boils down to relationship. We have a great relationship with our local mayor. We have a great relationship with our senator, with our assemblyman. They're involved, we're involved. We can sit down with them at any time and discuss things. Our pastors, I continue those relationships with my pastors. Sometimes I can be the liaison between the two and have no problem doing that because I'm a part of the faith community, but I'm also part of the other community as well.
Right.
I'm an active person, in the Republican Party, but at the same time, I am a person of faith, and I could see aside from that, these are issues that are not political. These are issues that impact our family and the way we want to raise our children. So I think if there's room for relationship to be built in your local community, start there. You should know them by their first name basis, sit down and have lunch with them, take them out. Hey, if it means visiting these churches, sit down with these pastors in their world and hear their heart for what they're going through. And then, once that's established, then you could start, asking them, hey, would you like to join me here, or informing them. So a lot of times, a lot of the faith community don't know what's happening. What I do a lot is, if these bills concern us, I actually send them the bill so they can read for themselves. You're not getting any secondhand information. Read line by line to see for yourself what these people are intending to do or what the intent behind the bill is. That is helpful because then they feel confident when they're speaking about something that they have researched, they have read. They feel like I know what's happening, as opposed to hesitating to speak about something they're not well versed in. So I just think it boils down to relationship. Build those relationships. I do that all year long. And if I am not serving in my church, then that means I have that morning to visit a church. And I look at the calendar at least twice a month. I'm somewhere aside my church, building relationships, checking up on them. Hey, how are you? Glad to see. There's so many good things that are going on in all these churches that fall under the radar because they don't really ask for recognition for the work that they do. And they are on the front lines of our communities. They just don't get the credit. They don't get enough credit for what they do.
They are. We need them. They provide so many things, right? That we don't want the government to provide. We want faith organizations to provide. So that's a great model. And again, to those listening, Luz has been incredibly effective, but it's because she's committed to it for the long haul. And it is relationship based. We make change from the local level up. That's where the win is. So even if it's a couple of churches, if people are listening and thinking, who do they know that they can get involved in and educate? These pastors, these priests, they're busy. They're not necessarily doing what you and I are doing, which is watching all the things coming down from Trenton. Remember life before you did that. And remember, that's not something that, was always in front of you. So help them with information, with relationship, and build them up. I really appreciate you, Luz. I know you've made a big difference in Vineland. You will continue to make a big difference in New Jersey. We need you. We appreciate you. You've paid a price for this. You work hard. We see that, but you're one of the models that we can all use to inspire everybody else. So a big thank you to you from all of us.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this community that I absolutely love and adore. I'm a part of it. I love our pastors and our leaders of all denominations. They're just good folks on the front lines. And I just love to give them whoever's listening and watching this, just know that I pray for you. And, and I know it's a tough job and not everybody has that call in their life, but those that do just really deserve a lot of credit. And I pray for them. It's difficult.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Luz. Thank you so much. And to my audience, check Luz out online. You'll see a lot of things from her, what's going on down in Vineland. I'm sure that if you need inspiration or support or just sort of want to talk to her about how she's doing this,
reach out.
Reach out. We'll give you her information because we can replicate this across the state and across the country. Luz, thank you. God bless you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So George, I said hello.
All right. That sounds good. And to my audience, guys, we'll see you next week.